So here's my large diced potatoes. They're about 1 to 2 centimetres in diameter. They've been bubbling away now for between 10 and 12 minutes, and I'm just going to check to make sure that they are done. And the test for readiness is just to pop a knife in and see if it goes straight in, which it does. So we can now take that off the heat and mash them as we normally would. So we've got our potatoes, they're off the boil now, we've drained them. We'll pop some salt and pepper in with some seasoning. And we're now going to mash it, as we normally would, to make sure there's no lumps whatsoever. If your potatoes that you have are a Maris Piper, these will mash perfectly. There's a good variety of potato for mashing purposes. If you've got a bit of a dry potato, you may need to add a tiny nib of butter just to bring that together. Then keep mashing that and come back to you in a moment. We're ready to make our rissoles now. We have 250 grams of cooked chicken shredded. We have approximately 500 grams, that's double the portion of chicken to what there is potato. So that's mashed potato, and that's already seasoned. We have in our bowl here, we have some plain flour, 2 eggs which have just been lightly beaten with a fork, and we have some breadcrumbs. In this particular case, I've got some ones from the shop, just shop bought ones, plain breadcrumbs. These were 80p from Asda, just for quickness. But normally when I'm teaching, certainly for GCSE, I'd be expecting you to make your own bread, wholemeal at that. And I'd be expecting you to make those breadcrumbs and put them through a food processor. But for quickness today, let's just demonstrate the process. So we've got chicken. We're going to have about a capful, about a tablespoon of sage, just to give us a little bit of flavour. I think, as I've said before, with some of the other recipes that I'm doing with the jointing of the chicken, we have broth, which we normally put sage and onions, any leftover sage and onion stuffing in as well. And this is a use it all up type of recipe as well. So just open my drawer. I'm going to pop potato in. Now at the moment I've just mashed this potato, so it is actually quite hot. If you were going to be leaving these to be prepared for a later stage, you'd need to make sure that it was cooled down before refrigerating them, so you don't heat up the refrigerator. But more importantly, at this point in time, what you don't want to do is actually warm the chicken up to an unsafe temperature. So we do need to work fairly quickly. And ideally, if you have some mashed potato left over or you allow it to cool, it's probably going to be a little bit easier for you to handle, to bring it together to make the rissoles. Some people find it actually easier to be able to mince the chicken beforehand. So you have more of a sort of a, what would I call it, a more combined sort of chicken nuggety type feel to the chicken in terms of texture. But I actually find it's quite nicer to have the actual chunks of the chicken like you would have fish in a fish cake. So these don't actually have to be perfectly shaped. So whilst I'm going to be using a shaper to portion mine, I'll show you how you can do it in class. At home, you can just get the appropriate amount in your hand and try to make them the same size and use your math skills to proportion. So I'm going to get roughly a palm size, maneuver it round and make it into sort of a burger shape, a patty shape. Yep. And then I'm going to pop it into the flour and the various dredging stations, which we call them. So let's bring these into shot so you can see. So the first one we're going to be adding into seasoned flour. So I'll put a tiny little bit of Susie salt and Percy pepper in there. I'm going to fully coat it, and that's going to give us a nice base to work from. Now we're going to add our egg, which is kind of like a batter. It's going to help bind the flour and keep that flour there to keep its shape, but also at the same time, the next stage is our breadcrumbs, and this is going to help the breadcrumbs to stick. So maneuver and shape round, flip it over, pop it down. I find a tiny little bit of light pressure helps to mould this. See, no shaping required. Hold on one moment. We'll get the plate, bring that into shot, and then we've got a plate where we can stack our rissoles. So next one I'm going to do is I'm going to do it as I would expect you to do it for GCSE, to show skills in terms of shaping. Yes, you can hand shape the way they have done, but I'd expect you on a nice clean bench to be able to make them the appropriate size and shape. So here I've got a ring mold, and we're going to pop that so it's halfway up, and we're going to get a perfect pate shape. I'd expect you to shape your fish cakes in a similar manner, and you can make them all the same size and shape. So what we're going to do is dredge them again. This process is called dredging, and what we're doing is we're covering in seasoned flour to help maintain that shape. We're adding it into egg to give the breadcrumbs something to adhere to. And we're popping it in with the breadcrumbs and turning it around and patting it as we go. And what we're looking for is an even batch size. Okay. Now, the larger you make them in terms of the surface area, the more chance they have of being able to break away if you were to fry them lightly. So what I would always advise is try to go sort of medium size as opposed to too large, or you could even do smaller ones. And the best thing to do is to ensure that you have them refrigerated before starting. That helps just to be able to bind everything together and sort of solidify them, if you will. I'm actually going to be oven baking them today along with my oven fried chips. So I've done some parboiled potato chips with a crinkle cut fryer, crinkle cut cutter. The request from the boys today was to have some chips and some baked beans with rissoles, so I'm going to give in and let's just do that. So I'm going to pop those onto a meshed oven bake, oven bake tray. So the air flows around those with a tiny little bit of oil on, and those will crisp up quite nicely, so we'll have some chips and beans with them later on. Thanks for watching. So my rissoles are in here now, and that's 2 per person, so this is a really good recipe for 3 people. And I've got my oven baked chips which have been part boiled, drizzled in a light bit of oil, and they're on a chip basket tray ready to oven bake. So these will be a little bit healthier than having your own oven baked chips, or maybe those deep fry it. So these will now be in here for about 15 to 20 minutes until nice and golden brown, and I'll show you a picture of those now. So it's been about 20 minutes and my chips are looking golden brown, and so are my rissoles. So we'll get those dished up with some baked beans. So the rissoles and the chips are out of the oven now, so we're just going to serve those up. So 2 rissoles per person, followed by a little bit of chips and some baked beans if you wish. So this is quite a chip meal, excuse the pun. This is actually quite a cheap meal. Works out at just under £1 per person. Enjoy.